So today I am Philippa Main. I am a residential real estate agent. I am licensed in Virginia and Florida. And this is a presentation that I give in order to help people just better understand what the process of selling a home looks like and, give them some tips, tricks, and different ways of thinking about it as we go through the process. So this is not me selling myself, though you'll hear me talk about different examples of what I've done with my past clients. But it's designed to kind of help you get on the right track if you're thinking about preparing to sell your home. So with that being said, we will just jump right in. So today we're going to go step by step through the process. First, we're going to understand what the process looks like. Then which involves talking about preparing your home for sale, learning how to price your home correctly, marketing your home for sale and what that looks like, navigating offers and negotiations, and then closing the sale. So this is very high level, the 5 or 6 steps that are involved when you are looking to sell your property, but we're going to break them down and go over them individually this evening. So I always like to tell people to start by setting realistic goals. And that doesn't just mean, oh, I'm going to, manage my expectations about what I'm going to get for the price of my home. This is also setting yourself up for success by understanding your clear objectives for selling and also understanding your priorities and preferences. So I put these down as like the who, what, where, when, why, and how of real estate and selling your home. So if you start with your why and you understand why you are looking to sell your property, like what's motivating you to sell your home, that can help you plan the entire rest of the process. Because some people come into this transaction needing to, their why is they absolutely have to move. Other people have inherited a property and they don't want to keep it, so they have to sell it. So understanding that can kind of help inform some of your decisions as well. And it's just a good mental exercise to go through to make sure that you are managing your expectations accordingly and from start to finish. I also like to mention the how. So how are you going to do this? Are you going to do this by yourself? Are you going to hire a real estate agent? Are you going to be local for the sale? Are you going to do it from out of state? So each one of these questions can lead to many different kinds of, or each one of these, brief 5 words can lead to many other questions, but it's a good place to start as you go through it. So where, of course, where are you going to be? Where is the property and what does that mean for your process? Are you going to have to hire an agent who you don't know? Can you hire someone you do know? And as you'll see, as we're going through these questions, none of them just have to be the where of it when we're talking about who as well. So this is it's designed to kind of help you have a flowing process of how you think about, what you need to be doing to prepare for selling your home. Of course, the what is both literally the property, is it a piece of land? Is it a single family home? Are you going to be selling it with all of the furniture inside of it? Are you, is there anything else that you need to be considering? And then the who is who's going to help you with this process. Both, are you hiring professional help or are you doing it yourself? And also, do you have family members or friends or companies or services? So take these questions as you go through each phase of the process and use that to guide where you go next. This is an outline that I include. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but essentially every home sale process is going to flow in generally this order. There are certain steps that might happen before others. They might happen simultaneously, but by going through this quickly, it'll give you a good understanding of what to expect the entire overall process to look like before we drill down into some of the more specifics. So typically, if you're going through this process with a real estate agent, you want to get in touch with them first and foremost. Don't start making big decisions. Don't start making big renovations unless it's something that has to be done, like your roof is leaking and you have to get that fixed. Don't start making any of those kinds of decisions before you've talked to some real estate agents, and preferably before you've decided who you're going to hire, because they're going to help you decide what's the most important things that you need to be focusing on. So you'll get in touch with a real estate agent. Then you'll review your home's value analysis is step number 2, and determine your home's pricing strategy, which is step number 3. These sound similar, but they're 2 kind of different things, because a pricing strategy is the ultimate decision of what you are going to list your home at when you put it on the market, whereas understanding your home's value analysis is looking at comparables and assessing if a buyer were to look at my property, if an appraiser were to look at my property, what is the general range that they might find it worth? So after steps 2 and 3, then typically you'll sign your listing agreement. If you are hiring a real estate agent, that'll involve a lot of different paperwork depending upon, what state you're in, whether, what kind of process, whether there's a short sale, whether there's a probate and inheritance. Different brokerages have their own forms. So you'll sign all of that then. And then step number 5, you've probably already been preparing your home for sale a little bit by the time we get to this point, but this is when you're really going to hone in on what you need to do to get the property ready for sale. So that's going to include decluttering, deep cleaning, any renovations, moving out anything that you don't need there, big pieces of furniture, yard sales, all that kind of thing. Step 6 typically happens when you're speaking with your listing agent before you decide what your who you're going to hire, but you're also going to be doing it after the home is ready for sale, just so that you're refreshed on what is going to be happening with the marketing. And so this is reviewing your marketing plan and getting any professional photos of the home taken. So I always pay for professional photography for my clients. I always recommend if you're selling your home by yourself, you also pay a professional photographer. It's the first impression for your property. It's very important. And I do it for homes that I list for $50,000 and homes that I list for over $1 million. And so there's also other marketing things that you can do, and we'll go over that later in the process. But this is where in the roadmap of selling your home, you'll get those photos taken after the home is ready, but before it's put on the market. Step number 7 is the exciting but also stressful part of actually listing your home for sale. And so step number 8 is immediately after that, having open houses and private showings. And so you don't have to have open houses if you're uncomfortable with it. Some agents will say that they don't sell homes. I've sold homes off of the open houses alone. You put a sign down the neighborhood street, somebody drives by, and all of a sudden they realize, actually, today is the day they want to buy a house. But in addition, private showings will be scheduled, and your agent will talk to you if you've hired one about how that scheduling process will look like. Otherwise, if you're representing yourself, you'll want to make sure that you have a good way of getting people into your property so that you don't miss any opportunities, and a good scheduling calendar for yourself as well so you can stay on top of it. Then step number 9 is the really fun part where you start receiving offers. As an agent, when I represent my clients, I review those offers preliminarily, make sure I get any questions answered, do any of my due diligence before I present them to my client, just to make sure that they are that if there's any questions I expect my client's going to ask, I already have answers for them. It just streamlines the process. Step 10 is then the negotiation phase, if there is one. This can cover a lot of different things, not just the price. It could cover the closing date, whether you're going to do a lease back where you stay in the property after closing, whether there's going to be inspections, if there are inspections, whether you're willing to do repairs based on what's found. There's a lot that goes into that negotiation process. Step 11, then after you've done any negotiation, you'll accept your offer. After this, a lot of things happen very quickly. Your buyer, if they got the right to do an inspection, will start that process. If they're working with a mortgage lender, they'll order an appraisal. And throughout the time that you are what we call in escrow, which is usually 30 to 45 days, there are other opportunities where the buyer might try to come back and negotiate with you, which is why it's good to be prepared from the get-go with an understanding of, do they qualify for this property? Do I think it's going to appraise? All of the kinds of things that you want to make sure that you're proactive about so it doesn't hinder you getting to closing at the date that you expected to. So after they've done their home inspections and they've secured their financing, step 13 is that they'll get a chance to do their pre-closing walkthrough. This is typically the time where you'll have to be completely moved out of the home, and they're checking to confirm that the home is in the same condition it was when they saw it at their showing or home inspection, whatever's agreed upon. And after their final walkthrough, which usually happens within about, anytime from the day of closing to about 48 hours before, after they've signed off on that, they'll go to closing, which is when they'll sign their paperwork and they'll give the title company their money, when the title company will then give that money to you. These days, everything can be done remotely. It's not often that the sellers and buyers are in the same room, and you don't necessarily even have to be in the same city as your property to sign. So I know that that was a lot that we just went through, but this is from top to bottom, the general outline of a home selling process in most states in the United States. Obviously, there can be some nuance depending upon in places where, for example, New York, attorneys get involved. And, just depending upon if you're doing a short sale or things of that nature, but that's something that your professional representative is going to discuss with you at the time, if it differs from this outline. So we've talked a lot about, what the organization of the steps of the process look like in the previous slide, but I've put it here as well in writing, just in case this is easier for anybody to take a screenshot of. But this is essentially everything that we've just discussed. So at your initial consultation, if you've decided to hire a real estate agent, or at least interview real estate agents, then one of the things that they should be going over with you is understanding your goals. So they need to understand your reasons for selling and your desired timeline, so that they can help you set your priorities with the price, the speed of the sale, and the things to you that may or may not be inconvenient. A good real estate agent will hear what you're saying and provide professional advice based on their experience to try and accommodate as much as possible what you're looking to do, but also make sure that you're not shortchanging yourself. So for example, if you want to list your $500,000 home for $600,000, it's the real estate agent's job to let you know during this initial consultation that might not get your home under contract in the time frame that you wanted to get it under contract, and that you might end up not getting that price to begin with. This is also the time that they'll do a home assessment, where they'll walk through your property to help you evaluate it. This is to first determine, a pricing strategy and how your home compares to other homes that have recently sold, and also to advise you on things that you should be doing to get your property ready for sale. This includes, like we talked about, decluttering, repairs, that kind of thing. A real estate agent is not a home inspector, so they can't tell you like yes or no, this would or wouldn't pass, or this is going to cause a problem, but they should have a good eye for certain things that will help it show the best it possibly can to the general public of buyers. And then they should also be going over a market analysis with you. And so this is, like I just mentioned, where they're reviewing other properties and recent sales. Now, depending upon how much information they had about your property, they might not be able to come with exactly specific sales because they might not know enough about your condition to compare it. But having a general understanding of what your market is doing is part of what they're going to go over with you in that presentation. And so they'll talk about current market trends, explain to you how long homes have been staying on the market, how long they typically go under contract. And in the market that we're in generally in the United States right now, it's important to recognize that we want to price based on our competition and not price based on previous sales solely. And what I mean by that is, if your neighbor sold their home 6 months ago for more money than your current agent is telling you, or that your agent is currently telling you could, that might be because the market has slowed down a bit. So you want to look at your neighbor's homes, and if there's someone who has a home similar to yours and it has not sold for that price that you want to make sure you're kind of undercutting them, right? That you're listing a little bit lower so that your home gets the traction that theirs is not. In line with exactly what I was just mentioning, at this meeting is when you'll discuss your pricing strategy, which involves, are you listing a little bit higher to offer a closing cost incentive to the buyer, or offer the buyer a rate buy down for a mortgage? Are you listing a little bit lower because you want to get it sold quickly? Are you listing really low because you want a bidding war? These are all things that you can discuss with your agent and decide what's going to make the most sense for you. And of course, the other option of just listing right on the money and going through a more traditional process of trying to capture as many interested buyers as possible without turning any of them away for it being priced too high or seeming a little concerning that it's priced too low. So you'll also discuss the process like we've done today at your meeting with your real estate agent, just so that you understand how they handle the nuances of different phases of the process, and also go over any legal things and paperwork, including the listing agreement if you're ready to sign it, and then helping you understand your obligations and the timeline of what it's going to take to get your home on the market from the day of that meeting, and then also to closing after you have put it under contract. They should also be going over, of course, any questions or concerns with you, and setting expectations for all the next steps. So my initial consultations with my clients, I usually tell them to budget an hour and a half. This takes us all the way from me walking through their home, answering any specific questions they have about what they need to do to get their home ready, and then moving through explaining the home buying or the home selling process, going through all of these other things that we just talked about, and leaving plenty of time for questions at the end. Of course, if you don't have that amount of time and sold a home before and you're just looking to kind of get through the process quickly, it can certainly go faster. But I always say, budget a little bit more. It's a very important process. You wouldn't want to hire, say you were getting plastic surgery, you would not want to hire a doctor who was in and out in 15 minutes. You would want to take the time to make sure that they understood what your goals were and what your final results you wanted, so that they would, you would end up getting what you needed from that professional. So when we talk about the paperwork, some of the things that you're going to go over with the listing agent during that meeting are the listing agreement, your property disclosure statement. This varies from state to state. For example, Florida has a 4 to 5 page disclosure. Virginia has a 1-page disclosure. Florida's disclosure actually asks questions. Virginia's disclosure just says, hey, you're buying a house. You got to do your own due diligence, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. So your seller or your listing agent will explain to you what you have to disclose on there. There might be other federal, state, or local forms. Like, for example, if your home was built prior to 1978, you'll have to sign a lead-based paint disclosure. If you're in an HOA, you'll have to sign disclosures about that. There might be other state forms for disclosing whether or not you're in a flood zone, or if you're in a loud noise zone from local airport facilities or things of that nature. I also recommend that prior to this appointment, if you can, that you start gathering your title related documents. So these are going to be your deed, information about your mortgage. You don't have to have all of your original mortgage paperwork, but just understanding what your payoff is, who you're paying your mortgage to, and then ensuring that there are no liens or encumbrances on your property. So you can, check with the local county. There's different websites where you can call in to confirm. You usually know, but every now and again, someone doesn't realize that a contractor they paid 10 years ago actually put a lien on their home and they didn't notice because they haven't gone to sell yet. Now is the time to get those things cleared up. I mentioned it previously, but if you're in a homeowners association, not only will you have to sign a local disclosure form for that, I also recommend that you go ahead and start obtaining a copy of your HOA rules, the regulations, any financial statements, anything and everything that you as a home buyer would want to have access to if you were purchasing a home. Go ahead and gather that now. In some states, it's required that you provide that to the buyer. And in other situations, if the buyer is going to ask for it anyway, you might as well be proactive and have it on hand. If you've done any upgrades or repairs, replaced the roof, put in a new appliance set, anything, have a termite agreement, or have rented a propane gas tank that has an ongoing agreement that can be transferred to a new homeowner, now's the time to compile all of that as well. And then if you have done a pre-sale inspection, that's paperwork as well that you would have, maybe not necessarily in time to meet with your real estate agent, but this is another piece of paperwork that might come up between you deciding to sell your home and you actually listing it. And then some of the other paperwork involved in the transaction that comes at the very end is your closing documents. And so these are all the paperwork this is all the paperwork that you're going to sign when it actually comes time to transfer ownership to the new homeowner, the person buying your property. You can sign locally or elsewhere as long as the title company is in agreement with it. Sometimes there's an additional fee to sign remotely if they have to send a mobile notary to you, but it is something that can be accommodated. And those closing documents, it's not as much as when you buy the home, but it's still a thick packet. And I recommend that if you're interested in reading it line by line, you ask for a copy 48 hours minimum before your closing. There just won't be time on the closing day for you to review every single line. The title agent or the person doing the closing with you will go through generally what you're signing. But if you're someone like me who likes to read the fine print, the time to do that is in advance. So now I want to talk about the 3 factors that get your home sold. And these are the condition, the price, and the marketing. And I always say the condition is up to you, the marketing's up to me, the price is something we decide on together. I can't come to your home and clear it up and paint the walls and vacuum the carpets and mulch the yard, right? So if we talk about in our initial consultation, different things that you want to do to get your home ready to show its best, that's on you. The marketing, however, then that's on me. I'm paying for professional photography. I'm paying for, postcards to go out to your neighbors or getting your digital website set up for your property. And of course, if you are representing yourself, marketing is also on you. And you want to make sure that you don't skimp on that and that you do it as professionally as the top agents in your market. Otherwise, your home will not show as well online to potential buyers as it would if it were represented by a top professional. And then, of course, the price is something that we need to decide together. As an agent who cares about my clients' outcomes, I never want to list my client's home at a price I don't think we can get them unless we've had a very specific conversation about the fact that that is the tactic we're using. And we have an understanding that if the home has not sold for that price within a certain amount of time, that we're going to drop that price. But this is a section, this is a factor of the process that you will ultimately determine with your real estate agent. Oh, I forgot that this comes up. I am a pricing strategy advisor certified by the National Association of Realtors. So when I just previously mentioned that if the price does not make sense, I'm going to tell you, it's backed by education and training and not just vibes. So preparing your home for sale, this is the condition part of the process, right? So you want to declutter and depersonalize. You want to make any necessary repairs and updates. Insurance companies may dictate what you need to do in order to sell your home, especially if you're in a place like Florida. Even now in states farther north, insurance companies are saying to home buyers, we're not going to insure a home if we know the roof is really old. And if a home buyer can't get insurance, then the lender cannot lend on the home, which means you're stuck selling to a cash buyer and they're going to want a discount because your roof is really old, for example. You want to stage your home to appeal to buyers. So think about how nitpicky you would be if you went into somebody else's home and how much scrutiny you would put their home under. You want to go around and look at your home with a fresh pair of eyes. Obviously, your realtor can help you do this as well, but you just want to make sure that it looks, smells, feels like a home that somebody would feel comfortable spending time in and would ultimately want to put an offer in on. I have a staging checklist that I send to my clients. It's on my website. If you're interested after watching this presentation and receiving it, reach out to me and I can send you the link for that. Everybody always talks about curb appeal with real estate. It is important, but it does not actually generate you any additional dollars in the price of your home. It just is something that helps your home sell a little bit more quickly. So we don't want to be spending thousands of dollars putting in new shrubbery unless you are selling, you know, a luxury $1 million+ home. And even in some parts of the US now, even $1 million is not the kind of sales price that you would need to be at to justify putting in a lot of additionals. We just want to make sure that you've got, you know, freshly mulched, weeded, mowed, that kind of thing. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you can consider a pre-listing inspection. If you think your home is in such a condition that you really need to know now where all of the fixes are and you're willing to make those fixes and repairs, it can certainly help to do this, especially if you're in a tougher market and you want to show buyers that you're serious about selling them a good quality home. But also understand that once you do a pre-listing inspection, anything that you discover in that inspection, if it falls within what your state requires you to disclose, you do then have to disclose it. So you can't do it, decide you don't want to make repairs and then not tell people what you found during that inspection, right? So we've gone through the first thing the first factor that gets your home sold. The second one that we talked about is pricing your home correctly. So this is probably the most important part of the preliminary process when selling your home is identifying your right pricing strategy. So you want to go over a comparative market analysis, either with your agent or on your own if you're representing yourself. This is going to look at recent sales. Those sales need to be as close as possible to your property. We don't recommend you look at anything over 1 mile or 2 unless you live in a very rural area or you live in a very unique property and you know there are homes similar to yours, but you just have to go farther away to find them. You also want to compare your home to homes that are in the same condition. You know, if your neighbor has a completely renovated home where they put in a new roof and new windows and the highest quality finishes and upgrades, and your home hasn't been renovated since the 1990s, your home still may be in great condition and, you know, be technically move-in ready, but you want to be realistic with setting your expectation on how a buyer is going to compare your neighbor's home to yours. You also want to take into account competition in a market that where homes are selling very quickly and there's very limited inventory. Obviously, you can price a little bit higher. If there are 6 homes in your neighborhood that are all very similar and have been sitting on the market for 30, 60, 90 days, you really want to be able to price lower than them in order to be able to get your home, to get interest and eyeballs on your home, right? And then also timing. So we're recording this on the 11th of November. We are about to go into a time of year where a lot of people stop buying. And not to say that there are not people buying and selling homes. Obviously, the numbers every year show that there certainly are, but the numbers also show that there is a dip. And a lot of times homes at this time of year statistically do sell for less. Maybe not a ton less, but if you're trying to maximize what you get from your home and you can afford to wait until March, April, springtime, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You might get more money for your home because it's a better time of year where more people are looking. You also might find that you're running up against more competition. So it's something to consider and discuss with your agent, your very specific situation. Because of course, real estate is hyper local. And so while we can talk in this presentation high level about what to expect, there are many nuances that will apply to, sometimes not just your neighborhood, but even your street in your neighborhood. And only, hiring an agent who has access to local data and understands your area is going to be able to help you determine the best way to price your home accordingly. So we just kind of talked about it, but the concept of competitive versus aspirational pricing. There are some markets where you can justify listing a little bit higher than the comparables say that you should, and you might get it. But aspirational pricing is not it should not be the choice if there's, a bunch of inventory, a bunch of competition. And so this is the part that it always hurts me to tell people because I have to be the bearer of bad news, but pricing is determined by the market. It's not determined by an appraisal. It's not determined by what you think it should be worth. It's not determined by what your neighbor's home sold for. And it's not determined by what I wish that I could get for you. Obviously, as a real estate agent, it's in my best interest to sell your home for as much as possible because then you'll love me, you'll give me a great review, you'll refer me to your friends and family, right? But that's also not what the price is. A lot of people confuse an appraisal, especially a home equity line of credit appraisal, as the value that they think they can sell their home for. This is the value that a bank has determined your property can be lended on, or loaned on. So for example, a home equity line of credit, their appraisal is usually going to come out higher than what a buyer's primary mortgage appraisal will come out for because their intention behind giving you the loan is slightly different. And so we really don't want to rely on that as much as we rely on the comparative market analysis like we talked about. Rarely is a pre-listing appraisal necessary, typically because the market sets the price. If you price too high or too low, you're going to find out very quickly. A pre-listing appraisal is several $100s, and the only time this is overly necessary is if you have a very unique property where there are really no comparables. This would be something like you have a 10-acre horse farm that happens to sit in a neighborhood where everything else is small single-family homes on, teeny tiny postage stamp lots. If you have a 10-acre horse farm and all of your neighbors are also 10-acre horse farms, we're just going to look at what the one most recently sold for before we decide to do a pre-listing appraisal. And I'm a big believer in trying to save my clients as much money as possible throughout this process so that you ultimately net as much as you can. And so if we don't need to be spending money on things like a pre-listing inspection or a pre-listing appraisal, I'm going to share that with you. But if I think that those are really going to set you over the edge and really see a big return on what you could ultimately sell your home for, then I'll advise accordingly. So the third factor that we talked about, marketing your home. If you are representing yourself, this is where you're going to really want to pay attention. If you're hiring a real estate agent, a lot of real estate agents are all going to do the same basket of things, right? They're going to put your home in the MLS, they're going to put photos up, they're going to write a description. But how they execute that process in every little step is what sets a really good agent apart from someone who is just kind of casually treating the process of selling your home. And I'll kind of give a couple examples of that as we go through this list. So professional photography and videography is huge. I've already mentioned it. You get one chance at a first impression. Statistically, 98% of people are starting their home search online these days. And I believe it's 5 to 7 photos you have to grab someone before they scroll on to the next property. Or decide to continue scrolling through the photos for your property. So what I like to do strategically is make sure that not only do I have a really good, front elevation photo, if I can have my photographer put a drone up, if they're not in a flight restricted area, we'll also do a drone photography of your lot if that's going to sell your lot in the best possible light. If you have a tiny lot, a large home, it's encroaching on the neighbors, maybe we don't want to show that right up front. But then I go into trying to chronologically put the photos in order, but making sure that we have big important things like the kitchen, the master bathroom. These photos come a little bit closer to the front. So we want people to understand kind of what they're looking at and what the flow of the home is, but we also want to grab them quickly. I also make sure that I put actual descriptions on each photo so that on websites like the MLS and Zillow, people can see and understand what they're looking at. And this is something I see get overlooked a lot. And my clients, when I'm representing buyers, will go, I have no idea if this is the third bedroom, the fourth bedroom, if they're two photos of the same bedroom from different angles. So even though it makes sense to you as the homeowner and the seller where it is, because you live in this home, especially if the home is vacant, it can be difficult for people to keep track of that. So I like to do that as well. As part of the videography, if it requires a video or it could benefit from a video, you want to make sure that that's, strategically designed as well. And that is going to come into play with who you hire as the photographer or who your agent hires. Part of the photography and videography package that I also offer is a Zillow showcase listing, which will have a virtual floor plan as well. And what this showcase listing gives you access to is primary placement in the search function, as well as the entire listing looks completely different to other sellers' listings. And that's just a nice, again, visual ad, right? So it kind of falls all under that category of how can we make your home look most visually appealing on the internet. So online listings and virtual tours. So the listing itself, I like to make sure the description is structured such that it'll be found in search engines when people are looking for things, or that it's got all of the main keywords that people are searching for when they are looking to buy a home that's like yours. So we're talking, granite counters, open floor plan, fenced backyard, all of these things that you don't want to just take for granted that people will see it in the photos. You want to make sure if they're just quickly skimming or they're typing into Zillow or a lot of these AI home search features that are out there now, like I want a 4-bedroom, 5-bath house with a fully fenced yard, that we're covering all of that in the description. And this is, again, I think why it's really important to make sure that when you hire a real estate agent, not only are they going to be a great project manager from start to finish and a great negotiator, a bulldog to get you the most possible money, but they really understand the modern landscape of property marketing. It's no longer necessary that you need someone who lives in your neighborhood to sell your home, because the knowledge of your neighborhood is not necessarily what gets your property sold anymore. It's the knowledge of, because that's something that you as the seller can provide, or they can do their own research. We have the internet, right? It's easy to do that these days. But actually having an understanding of how to most strategically utilize every marketing opportunity is what's actually going to get more people seeing your home. And so making sure you have a real estate agent, if you hire someone to represent you who can do all of that to a very high level, is important. Social media promotion. This can be paid ads. This can be organic Facebook groups. One of the things I like to do is give my sellers something that they can post as well. So if they're in any local community groups that I can't access because I'm not an owner in the community or resident in the community, or they want to post it on their own social media or email it out to their friends and family, all that kind of social media promotions is included when I do it as well. We already talked about open houses and private showings. This is obviously a very important way to be marketing your home from the private showings perspective. Otherwise, how are they going to know what your home is like? But open houses can also be great as well, again, when done with a strategy. Before I do an open house for any homeowners, I send out postcards to the neighborhood so the neighbors know to stop by. They might have a friend or family member who's been looking to move into your neighborhood, and now we have their eyeballs on the property as well. Print marketing materials, flyers in your home, flyers in a little box on the for sale sign at the front of your lot. I try to stay away from too much print stuff these days. Magazines, the turnaround time on them now is so long that by the time it gets published, it's usually not worth it unless we have a very specific luxury property or a unique property we know is going to take a while to sell. But that doesn't mean there aren't other print marketing opportunities to take advantage of. There's a ton of other marketing that I provide for my clients, but if we're going over high level, the most important things today in this meeting, these are the things that I like to let people know that they should be considering to either do themselves if they're representing themselves, or to make sure that their agents are doing for them. So now we're going to go into what it looks like to navigate offers and negotiations. As we discussed, you'll get, when the offers come in, you'll review them. I review them previously before reviewing them with my client. Other agents will bring them directly to you to review. It just depends on what you're most comfortable with. Your agent's going to help you understand the contingencies the buyer has asked for. What does it mean in this area or on this contract or in this state if a buyer has asked for a financing contingency? What does it mean if they've asked for a home inspection contingency? Which kind of home contingency or home inspection contingency did they pick? There's a lot to understand about that, and it's most easily discussed with you, not all up front in every what if scenario, but at the time that these offers are coming in, and you can determine with your agent what's most important to you to negotiate on. Like we said, there will be any counter offers and negotiations. You'll want to confirm with your agent how binding any of these counter offers are. Sometimes if a buyer submits an offer, there's a space on the contract where their offer expires within whatever timeline they give you. Other contracts are written where that offer is technically on the table until they send an email to say otherwise. Same with counter offers. Sometimes buyers have as much time as they want to respond to your counter. Other times you can put a deadline on it. You want to make sure that you choose the best offer for you. And so that doesn't always necessarily just mean the best price. And so sometimes when people are selling or buying homes, they ask their friends and their family members, or they're just chatting about it with people they know, and they start to get a lot of different advice. But remember, this is your process. And if it means more to you to get your home sold in the first weekend and you give up $5,000 to get it done, then that's the best offer for you, right? So when it comes to closing the sale, the timeline is typically 30 days. This is usually the amount of time that it takes an HOA to run through any of their paperwork, a title company to do all of their research, and a loan officer and a mortgage company to get a buyer pre-approved or completely approved for a mortgage, including the appraisal. That being said, if you are selling a home that's not in an HOA, you're selling it to a cash buyer, some of the title work might have already been done, you might be able to close in 7 to 10 days. In other circumstances, if you or the buyer needs longer, it might be 45 or 60 days. If you're in a state where attorneys are involved and or other, different checkboxes have to be taken care of, it could be longer. But typically I tell people to expect that by the time their home is under contract, sometime around a month is when you will be moving out. As we talked about, your buyer's going to get a chance to do a final walkthrough. This is the time when they would get a chance to confirm that the home is in the condition they expected it to be in. So once you've moved out all your stuff, if you've uncovered that there is a giant hole in your floor that your bed was placed over for years and you forgot about it or you didn't know that it was there, that's going to be on you to fix. Even if you sell your home as is, you still have to leave it to them in the condition that they expected it would be. We request that it be broom swept. It doesn't have to be deep cleaned, but you want to have all trash removed and basically just leave it in the same kind of condition that you would expect or want to move into the home yourself. This includes like patching any major holes, and certain things like this will be actually negotiated in the contract or will be written in the contract. But I always just like to use this opportunity to tell people, expect that you'll need to be completely moved out, all of your things gone before their final walkthrough, and that the home will need to be in a condition that it can be handed over to them and move-in ready. Also, you want to make sure that you keep your utilities on for the day of the closing. The buyer will also set theirs up to turn on that day, but it's best to make sure that you didn't accidentally get them turned off, because if there's no electricity or water, in order for them to do their final walkthrough successfully, they usually have the right to postpone the closing because of that. As we talked about earlier, your closing costs are something that, or your closing paperwork is something that you should review preferably before you sit down at the closing table to sign. Your closing costs are something that your listing agent will give you or should give you an approximate number on upfront. And then the title company will give you the final number a few days prior to closing. So this is something where, because there are fees that are based on the final sales price and the final date that you close on, certain things cannot be perfectly identified when your real estate agent does an estimate with you. But once you are under contract, they can ask the title company to get you a preliminary number, and then your final number should be coming to you within 48 hours before the closing. Closing is when the transfer of ownership happens. It is at this point in time that once you sign the paperwork, once the buyer has signed the paperwork, once all the money is in, that is no longer your house. I every now and again hear a rumor that people think you have 3 days to back out. That is not the case. This is their home now. So make sure that long before you sign your contract with them, that you are comfortable closing on time and closing with the terms of that contract. The contract is legally binding, and it is rare that you as the homeowner or the home seller will be in a position to unilaterally cancel it. That means you will have to sell your home to the buyer. And so you want to make sure that you really think about, before you put your home on the market and before you accept a contract, that you're happy with moving forward. After, of course, closing the sale, this is when, you're going to be moving out in advance, transitioning to your new home. If you are doing a simultaneous closing where you're buying a property and selling a property on the same day or within the same couple of days, you really need to talk to your real estate agent about what that's going to look like. If you're representing yourself, I would take some time to consider how you strategically want to implement that plan. If you have to be moved out before your buyer can move in, then you also need to have all of your things somewhere. You're going to have to talk to a moving truck company, maybe stay with friends or family. So consider that as part of, this process when you're preparing to sell as well. So I just mentioned closing costs a little bit. So the costs of selling, we're going to go over just the different kinds of things that can come up, not specific numbers, just because the specific numbers can vary by state. They can vary by the agreement that you make with the buyer, with your agents. And we want to make sure that you just have an understanding of what could come up, but not exactly what those amounts would be based off of, because we don't know your personal situation. So of course, any home repairs or staging costs are things up front that you're going to have to budget for. You might decide that you want to offer the buyer a home warranty. And if you do, I can tell you that approximate that they're going to range anywhere from, a few $100s to $1,000+ depending upon the kinds of coverage that you want to offer or the kinds of coverage that the buyer is asking for. You then have other closing costs. So your title fees, this is the cost for the title company to do a title search, to draft up the deed, to record the deed, any mobile notary fees. There's also going to be conveyancing and legal fees. So if you hire a lawyer, if you have to, or if you choose to, those are your legal fees. The conveyance fees, sometimes in certain, states, cities, counties, municipalities, there is an additional fee just for the privilege of selling your home. In certain states, we have things called doc stamps or deed stamps. Those are things that you might have to pay as well. And then, of course, if you've hired a real estate agent, you likely will have negotiated that you're paying them. You may have negotiated that you're paying the buyer's agent as well. You certainly don't have to pay a buyer's real estate agent, but your representative will talk to you about whether you should budget for that given the situation with your home in the market. And then, of course, any moving expenses. It is a lot more expensive to move these days than I think people expect. It's no longer, $100 for a truck, a couple $100 for some guys to come out and help you for a few hours. Depending upon how far you're moving or the kind of move experience you want to have, you could be looking at thousands of dollars. So it's better to get a quote on that sooner rather than later so you can budget it all in. And then I am not a tax advisor. I cannot legally talk to you about your tax liabilities, but I do like to put in here as well that you might run into potential capital gains tax. This is not something that necessarily gets withheld at closing. This is something that usually you are going to be paying at the end of the year or quarterly, depending upon how you pay your taxes. This is something, and what time of year you close, this is something you need to consult with a tax professional with if you think that this is going to be relevant to you. And that is the end of our presentation. I like to leave the last, 10 to 15 minutes for questions and for anyone to screenshot my information.